Hello, this is the 2023-24 school year Enrollment Audit and Child Count training webinar. This training is on the enrollment audit process. There are what we think of as 6 phases to the enrollment audit, and each of those phases is included in this table here. We start with pre-audit data prep, which is the phase that we're currently in. Trainings take place in March for residency verification and July or August for enrollment audit and child count process. The next phase is initial documentation review. So this is what we think of as the beginning of the enrollment audit for LEAs. After initial review is issue resolution, which is the point at which you can submit new documents to resolve any issues that were discovered during your initial review. Then we have final appeals. That's LEA's last opportunity to submit documentation for consideration for the audit. And then after final appeals, we have reporting. EACC publishes a final enrollment audit report every year that goes to the DC Council and then is eventually available to the public. So important dates. Please note that many of these dates are unique to each LEA depending on the timeline of their individual audit. However, there are a few that are universal for everybody. So October 5th is the data freeze. This is when all LEAs ensure that students are enrolled stage 5 in their SIS by 4 p.m. and in the enrollment audit and child count application. On October 12th, that's the first certification. LEAs must certify their rosters to be part of the audit and include all of those students for funding purposes. Then October through November is your e-file submission deadline. That is when your records are due in box. This varies by LEA. Also in October, November is the initial review stage. That's the beginning phase of the audit. That's going to vary by LEA. November is when most of the issue resolution takes place. Then November 15th is our second certification. This is the date where you need to certify that your demographic and special education data is accurate. December 1st is your final appeal deadline, the final date to submit more documentation. And then finally, the audit is complete on December 15th, which is the date of the third certification. That is when the LEAs certify their audited enrollment numbers and we close out the audit for the year. So in the pre-audit data prep phase, a big portion of what you're working on is residency verification. We conducted training on that in March, and the webinar is available on the website if you need to refer to it. You can also refer to the OER handbook published in February 2023. This includes a wealth of information on what makes documents acceptable, what makes them unacceptable, things to look for. It's really helpful when you're verifying residency paperwork. You should also be reviewing the EACC Residency Verified Click application. EACC RV is how we often shorten that. The students who are on this report with an indicator that says Y or yes means that they do not require supporting residency documents. Just do want to note, though, that simply because a student has a residency indicator of yes in the Click report, that does not take away the LEA's responsibility to investigate residency concerns or to complete residency verification forms. So please know if you get some kind of evidence or new piece of information that suggests a student does not live in DC, you should still follow up on those, even if the student is residency verified. So in order to prepare your documents for the audit, you will need to set up folders in your e-file. Your e-file is a box folder that you'll be granted access to by EACC. You should create, well, when you open the folder, you'll see a folder for your LEA. Inside the LEA folder, you'll see a non-public and a school folder. Inside each of those, you'll see a K2 adult and a pre-K3, pre-K4 folder if you serve early childhood populations. In your folders, you should then be creating 3 sections of the alphabet, a folder for each section. We've got A through G, H through M, and N through Z. Inside those folders, you're not going to make an individual folder for each student. You are just going to start saving PDFs wherever they belong according to the alphabet. Now, where the PDFs are concerned, you have two options. You can either combine everything into one PDF document. So that would mean a student's DCRV followed by their residency support. And you could name it student one last dot student first dot PDF. That's just the name of the file, one file per student. So if you have 100 students, you have 100 files. Or if you don't want to combine your files or you don't have the platform to do so, you can save them separately. And in this case, you want to add the document type to your file name. So you'll have a file that's named studentlast.studentfirst_DCRV. That should be immediately followed by studentlast.studentfirst_support. So you are going to save all your DCRVs with the name DCRV in the file name, and then you're going to save your support documents, no matter what they are, support. And this is so they all sort properly in Box, and it enables the auditors to review them quickly and efficiently and be less likely to miss a student's documents. Some tips and reminders on the Box folders. These are reused each year. You may notice empty folders or old documents hanging out in your Box folder. Go ahead and delete anything that does not belong there. You are able to delete folders and files. You don't need to ask for permission. Just go ahead and delete something that's not relevant to this school year. Also, you really should start uploading as soon as you have access in August, likely August 31st. Don't wait until the last minute. You never know what might happen down the road. And if you have everything like you should, just go ahead and start uploading it. You don't need to wait until the day before your e-file deadline. There is a lot of guidance in the EACC handbook on troubleshooting for Box. If you're having issues with your uploads, you can refer to the appendix for help. If you're still having issues, you can reach out to us and we'll try to help you figure it out. The best practice is for you to organize your files in the same way internally as you will submit them to the e-file. And the reason we say that is it just makes it a whole lot easier if you're just copying and pasting over an entire folder than trying to collect all your files electronically, move them to Box, rename them. That adds a whole lot of extra steps that you don't need. So if you just start off the bat doing it the way we show in the diagram, then you will be all set to just copy and paste over when you're moving to Box. Another important part of pre-audit data prep is setting up your POC roles and getting EACCA access. So your LEA data manager is responsible for updating all points of contact roles in OSSI systems. If you need someone on your team to have EACCA access, that user must have a SLED credential, and they need to be listed as an Enrollment Audit POC. The people in your school who might hold this role are your data manager, whoever it is that handles enrollment for your LEA, whoever it is that handles enrollment for your specific school, if you're a multi-site LEA, and then your head of school receives enrollment audit communication as well, because they are responsible for completing your certifications. And then lastly, another really critical piece of pre-audit data prep is verifying your EACCA rosters. From the moment you get access to the EACCA, you should start looking at those rosters. There is usually some troubleshooting that has to be done. Sometimes student data is incomplete and you didn't realize it, or there's an error and you didn't realize it, and that's going to prevent them from appearing in the EACCA. If they're not in the EACCA at the time that you certify, you cannot get paid for their enrollment. So review those rosters all the time, especially if you're continuing to add new students after school starts. You want to make sure what's in the EACCA matches what you have in your SIS, so you're able to get funding for all of the students who are actually enrolled and attending your school. If you cannot figure out why a student's not appearing in the EACCA, you can submit an OST ticket and your LEA liaison will help you investigate. Once you have access to the EACCA, which should be August 31st, you should refer to your LEA's workflow table to identify all your important deadlines. So when you log into the EACCA, this is going to be at the bottom of the page, and it will include all of the key dates for the audit, when your field work starts, when your issue resolution starts, when your e-file is due. All of those dates are housed right there, so you can refer back to them at any time. I also highly recommend putting Outlook invitations on your calendar and the calendars of anyone else who is a part of this project, so that way you don't forget and you get reminders. The EACCA does not have the ability to send out auto reminders for these deadlines. You are responsible for keeping track of these, but we make it as easy as possible to find them and refer back to them as needed. So trainings, we have had a number of enrollment trainings, or have a few more that are available to you. Residency verification training happened in the spring. It's a summary of the OER handbook, and that is on our website and linked to in this presentation. This is the second one, the Enrollment Audit and Child Count training. This is a summary of the EACC handbook. So one handbook is on residency verification, all of the paperwork and documents, and then the other handbook is more focused on the process of the audit and all the different stages and steps and requirements. In the actual EACCA itself is the Enrollment Audit and Child Count application training. This is a self-paced recorded webinar that walks you through how to use the different functionalities in the application. That's not mandatory, but if you need a refresher, if you would like someone new to your team to watch it so they feel confident in using the EACCA, that's never a bad idea. And then lastly, if your head of school needs to receive SLED credentials, they will need to participate in the head of school training webinar so that they can log into the EACCA to do your certifications. So the first certification happens on October 12th. It is used to determine the October and January UPSFF payments for your LEA. So it's a very important date. It is also used to create the roster of enrolled students that will be audited through the EACCA. Again, if a student is missing from this list, then you will not be able to receive funding for their enrollment. You will have several weeks from August 31st until October 5th to make sure this data is correct. So please make sure you're watching it carefully. Another note to be aware of, because I receive questions about this often, the first certification does not lock in SPED level, EL status, or other demographic data. That does not have to be final and accurate until the second certification on November 15th. So if you need to use the first phase to just strictly focus on students appearing on the roster, that is what your priority should be during this phase in the audit. After October 12th, when you've done the first certification, then you have a month to go in and look at those students and make sure the demographic details are also correct. You, LEA, shall certify accurate, complete, and valid student data. In the event that the data certified is incorrect, there's a process that LEAs can follow to resolve this. It is in the EACC handbook, and there are a number of steps to follow. Most important thing to note is that if you need to add a student post-certification, you need to submit the OSSI support tool ticket that you put in prior to the first certification. So this should be an issue that you were working on resolving before you certified and just couldn't figure out how to do it. This is not an opportunity to add students after the fact that you just forgot about or overlooked. This has to be a known issue that didn't get resolved before October 5th. And then there are also steps for removing a student, and those must be completed by November 25th. Initial documentation review is what most people consider the beginning of the audit for their LEA. For this phase of the audit, you'll upload all your residency forms and supporting documents to your e-file in Box by the deadline. Those deadlines are located in the audit workflow scheduling table. If you don't upload all of your documents, that may lead to all of your review being done during appeals, which means you would have to upload documents for every single student in the EACCA individually. That would be a big lift that we want to avoid for sure. Another note about e-file is that it is only used during the initial review. So once that phase has ended and you've submitted everything there, all of your corrections or updated documentation will go through the EACCA directly. You won't go back to the e-file. This year, well, starting last year, we began sending out e-file error notification letters. So before the auditors begin initial review for your LEA, they're going to spot check your box folder. And they're looking for kind of widespread issues or errors with the school's e-file that might make it impossible for them to adequately complete their review. If they notice an error like this in your file, you'll receive a letter in email that will explain what the error was and the steps you should take to resolve it. Failure to do so, failure to take those steps or resolve the issue may result in a full scope audit or a number of rejections that otherwise could have been avoided. The letters will include instructions on the next steps and relevant deadlines depending on your workflow schedule. And some examples or some reasons why you might receive an e-file error notification is if you're missing subfolders, if a randomly selected set of documents are illegible or inaccessible, meaning they can't be read or can't be opened for some reason. If large numbers of student records are missing, so like an entire grade or an entire segment of the alphabet, or folders are not formatted to the proper specifications, or the naming conventions have not been followed, and auditors can't tell which documents belong to which student. Once they begin their review, auditors will conduct a 100% review of all DCRVs. Additionally, all OPC forms, sworn statements, and attestations if you have them. And then they will look at a sample of supporting residency documents, excluding those students who are OSSI residency verified. If you're interested in understanding the sampling process in more detail, it is outlined in the EACC handbook. Also, just as a disclaimer, OSSI reserves the right to review 100% of LEA documents at any LEAs of non-residency concerns, or for any other reason that raises questions for us about the validity of your LEA's residency documentation verification process. During initial review, auditors are reviewing forms and documents based on DC laws, regulations, and OSSI policies. Guidance on these laws, regulations, and policies are found in the OER handbook. If documents that were submitted are not compliant with these laws, regulations, or policies, they will be rejected by the auditor. When a document is rejected, you'll see a rejection reason in the EACCA on the student's page, which will point you in the direction of how to resolve the issue. If you think the rejection was an error, you review the documents and you can't find anything incorrect, that's fine. That happens sometimes. And the way to resolve that would be to resubmit the same thing. And if it is correct and valid, then it will be approved in the issue resolution phase. For our residential LEAs, the audits will conduct an in-person head count. The general timeline is outlined in the EACC handbook, and then the actual dates and timelines will be solidified in September. So the auditors will reach out to schedule that with you. Auditors will also complete a 100% review of supporting documents for any students in non-public placements. So all of your non-public placements will have their residency support reviewed, which is why we ask that it goes in a separate folder. So all of those students will be reviewed regardless of their residency verified status. Next up is issue resolution, and there are a few different activities that have to be completed on different timelines during issue resolution. So to resolve your actual resolution documents, to resolve issues from initial review, are due by the date indicated in the audit workflow table. So you'll see in the workflow issue resolution end date. That is when you need to submit all of your follow-up paperwork from the first round of the audit. Duplicative enrollments are due by the date indicated in the duplicative enrollment application. This is a separate application. There are some separate documents and guidelines to help you resolve your duplicative enrollments, and they have a date that may be different than your issue resolution for the audit. And then lastly, 2 elements are due by the second certification on November 15th. That includes resolving demographic data errors and completing child count questions. Issue resolution for residency documents. Once auditors complete the initial review, your results will be available in the EACCA. You will have until your issue resolution deadline to either agree with the auditor determination, which really just means you accept that the student's documents were rejected and you're not going to do any more to try to resolve them, or to upload documentation that resolves the rejection reason. If an LEA fails to respond to an auditor determination by the close of issue resolution, then you cannot submit a final appeal. If you would like a chance to submit a final appeal for a student, you have to submit something during the issue resolution process. If a student is added to the OCRV Click application after October 5th, so they're included in the sample, but they are residency verified. If their documents are rejected, you can submit a screenshot of the student's name appearing with the Y in the OCRV list as your supporting document. Please be aware that this means the Click report, not your SIS. And then to resolve demographic errors, after the first certification, you should review and resolve all of your demographic data issues. You need to complete the following. Confirm demographic data is correct in your SIS, confirm that the data being sent to OSSI is reflected correctly in the EACCA, and confirm there are no integration issues with the SIS or OSSI. Any demographic data element issues must be resolved by November 14th at 4 p.m., the day before second certification. If you're having issues and you cannot fix something on your own, you need to submit an OST ticket no later than October 28th. Issue resolution for duplicative enrollments are all resolved through duplicative enrollment application. You should review the guidance to that application to make sure you're on top of your duplicative enrollments. If you miss a duplicative enrollment deadline, you might lose credit for that student. And whatever results are in the duplicative enrollment application will eventually feed over to the EACCA. So in the second certification, you are required to certify that 2 data elements are accurate, valid, and complete. That would be the demographic data from the LEA source system and the final child count number for students with disabilities. The second certification does not confirm residency status. So if you're in the middle of issue resolution and your total, your UPSFF roster is not what you expect it to be, don't worry about that. That number will not be locked in until the final certification. Your head of school must complete the second certification on November 15th by 5 p.m. When it comes to child count on the second certification, there is no process to amend or change data after that date. Child count data is considered as is on the certification day. The child count population includes students who are stage 5 enrolled as of October 5th, and they need to stay in compliance with child count requirements up to and through the second certification. If the data is not compliant with the requirements, the student may not be included in the child count population. More information on this can be found in the EACC handbook, or you can speak with your special education coordinators to make sure they understand all of this as well. Final appeals is the last phase of the audit for LEAs, and so if a student has had their documents rejected both in initial review and issue resolution, you have one last opportunity to complete a final appeal. In order to do that, you need to have attempted to resolve the issue during initial review and issue resolution, and you need to submit your additional compliant residency document no later than December 1st. If you have it before December 1st, you are absolutely welcome to submit it, but it must be done by December 1st. In previous years, OSSI held final appeal meetings to discuss their documents after the final deadline, but this has not been a practice at OER since before the 2020 audit. December 1st will be the final opportunity to submit documents. If nothing is submitted by then, or the documents that are submitted are not compliant, the student will be considered an unverified resident and the LEA will not receive funding for their enrollment. The determinations after final appeals will be posted in the EACCA by December 14th. This decision is final and irrevocable. There are no further appeal opportunities. So once that documentation is submitted on December 1st, there is nothing left for LEAs to do except for wait for your determinations. Nothing else will be reviewed after that, and there won't be any meetings or hearings or conversations before or after the documents or results are posted. In some extremely limited circumstances that we lay out in the handbook, OER may contact an LEA to discuss a discrepancy with the final appeal document. You can look at the handbook for more information on that. It is highly unusual and I think only happened once last year. So this is not a practice that is widespread. Occasionally there are some just unusual circumstances surrounding a document that we need to clarify before we can say yes or no during that final appeal phase. After the final appeals are over, the third certification will take place on December 15th. This will confirm your final enrollment numbers for your LEA, and the audit, as far as you're concerned, is concluded. The last phase is more of an OSCE phase. This is reporting. At the conclusion of the audit, we compile a report and a supplemental data table, which goes to DC Council and then is eventually released to the public. It includes all the high-level outcomes of the audit. So final resident numbers for each LEA, unverified residents, all kinds of different data points relating to the audit results. And then lastly, for any LEA that has unverified residents at the close of the audit, so students whose residency status wasn't able to be determined during the audit, you will not be able to get funding for those students, but it is still the LEA's responsibility to resolve the errors. So there are steps outlined in the EACC handbook, but the summary of those steps to verify residency are first to provide notice to the enrolling person detailing the issue, the action, and the deadline. If the residency is still unresolved after that notice, then the LEA shall require the enrolling person to consent to a home visit. If a home visit does not occur, the LEA will have to withdraw the student because they are enrolled unlawfully. And we may follow up on these to make sure this process is happening. So please do take note of your unverified residents in December and begin communicating with the families to try to set up a home visit or to resolve the document issues so that you do not have to withdraw a student mid-year. And that is the end of this webinar. If you have questions about the content or at any point throughout the enrollment audit season, you can reach us at osce.enrollmentaudit@dc.gov, and we look forward to working with you through the audit this year. Thank you.